All right, let's get it on. It's time for Southeastern Rewind's Tell Me More. Hey, y'all, I'm David Sommers here with the Tennessee stud Ron Fuller, answering 5 questions from the latest Studcast, now on Ron's new home on YouTube. The 5 questions on this edition of Tell Me More come from Studcast episode number 21, the 21st official Studcast on the site, and you can also find it, by the way, at tnstud.com. It's called World Roundup 1965. Remember to find Southeastern Rewind on YouTube, subscribe, ring the bell to get reminders on when the greatest stories in wrestling will be dropped on YouTube, and be sure to tell your friends about Southeastern Rewind. What's going on, my friend, the Tennessee stud in the Great Smoky Mountains? What you doing today?
Oh, my man, we're in a little bit of rain today. Kind of nasty out there today, but it's going to bring the leaves on down and change the colors even more, and it's just going to get more beautiful. So I got nothing to complain about, my man.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and everything is going well here, and we're going to have a good time as we get these 5 questions out there. Listen, a lot happening on Southeastern Rewind, and a lot going on with you too. And tell me about how many tickets you're selling for the big Dinner with the Stud deal you got coming up in October.
Wow, it's been really amazing. I kind of made a guess when I came up with the idea of how many I thought would be there, and I kind of picked the number 30. Figured, man, maybe we'll get 30 people, and we're already at we're very close to that number already, and we've still got 3 weeks, almost a month left.
Oh wow! So, man, this thing's taking off. Listen, 30 is a great number if you don't sell any more than 30. But it seems to me, I think you're right. I think you're going to do better than that because a lot of folks have been hearing about this along the way and really want to be a part of something special right there in Knoxville, on the river, no less, near Neyland Stadium. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a really unusual event, and really looking forward to it. We're going to do our first live Studcast, man.
Yeah.
We've never done one before, and we're also going to have a question and answer session from all the attendees. We're going to shake everybody's hand on the way in and try to shake their hands on the way out. Got a cash bar there, so I don't know how many of them will be walking straight on the way out. But we're trying to give them a little bit of everything. We've got some great door prizes. They've really collectible old programs and the wrestling magazines.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Great stuff, man. I think fans are going to just go crazy over these. And so it's going to be fun. Great dinner too, man. One of the best restaurants in the country. Barbecue buffet dinner, man. All you can eat. Just
nice.
And 2 hours to eat it in.
Yeah, that's cool. So it's you, it's Les Thatcher, it's Jimmy Golden hanging out with all the folks that are coming to see the Studcast live right there in Knoxville. That's a cool deal. All right, Stud, you ready to get this thing going?
Heck yes, man.
All
this
right.
is a good one. Hey, before we start, man, I got to tell you, this one is a very unusual Studcast because what I did is I decided that I was going to try to go all the way around the world in one Studcast and talk about the territories in the United States and then the countries outside the United States that didn't have a lot of territories. So this one's really unusual. I think. This one, I'm looking forward to probably, I got a feeling that I'm going to get some questions about telling stories on this one.
All right. Hey, let's start at a place you know very well. Tokyo, Japan. It looks like Hadoki Masai. Hadoki Masai has a question for you. And wait, I just got a note from you, Stud. Are we on Facebook Live right now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think we are, as a matter of fact. Yeah, we are, man.
All right. Smile pretty. All right. From Hadoki Masai from Tokyo, Japan. It says you talked a little about Japan and the 2 major companies. Which did you work for? And have you got another cool story about wrestling in Japan?
Oh, man. Got all kinds of Japan stories, man. Geez, it's hard to pick one. I tell you, I'm going to go to the bet. I think it was the last night of the entire tour. Flair was there. He had come over from America. He had been there for about 3 days. Flair and the Funks, both Terry and Junior and I, we went out into a part of Tokyo called Roppongi. Roppongi was a nightclub area, dancing, millions of lights like they have all over in Japan, and and had a pretty wild night. Ric Flair had himself a really nice overcoat. Wow, cashmere top coat, man, and so he took it off during the course of the night, and he wasn't paying much attention. And all of a sudden, we're in this one nightclub, and they've got these big, huge speakers about 10, 12 feet off the floor. And all of a sudden, there's a Terry Funk on top of one of the speakers, and he's got Flair's cashmere top coat.
Oh my God!
And he's swinging it around and around and around.
Oh God!
And Junior's talking to Flair, and I punch Flair, and I say, "Check that out." And he goes, "Oh my God!" and Terry jumps off the speaker, and then he continues to swing the coat around and around and around on the floor. It's just he's got his cashmere coat just collecting all the dust and stuff. So anyway, we left, and about 3, 4 in the morning, I don't know what time it was, we go into this little diner in Roppongi there, and it's packed. It's pretty well packed, man. And when we go in the door, it has one of these electronic doors that kind of, this was in 83, but Japan was so far ahead of us and with these technology deals.
Yeah.
And the door opened, it just split and went, and the air went like that, and the door spread back. And so when it did, Terry was the first one to go through the door. And as usual with Terry and Junior, man, they were crazy in Japan. So Terry stepped inside the door, and everybody turned to look. Just every time somebody came in the door, everybody turned to look. It's kind of a Japanese thing. Mm-hmm. And Terry threw his hands up in the air, and he went, "Hey!" And everybody in the place went, "Hey!" I did it back to him. Right?
Oh my God!
So we went in. Well, then we got the hey deal. They were into it. The Japanese liked it. Oh, so everybody, we were probably in there for 30, 45 minutes getting something to eat. And every time somebody came in, the whole restaurant would go, "Hey!" I was like, "Gosh, Terry, man, you goof." Those guys were pretty cool to mess around with, hang out with, though. And we had a good time that night, and we pretty much made the rounds in Roppongi, man. Do you know the population? You have any idea about the population of Tokyo?
Of Tokyo, like now or back then? Or
Well, back in '83.
I bet even back then, I'm just guessing. I would say 3 or 4 million. I don't know.
Try 25 million.
Oh, good God! Back then?
Yeah.
Wow! Holy cow!
25 million. And it was so big that when you got on the bullet train, we took the first trip, we took the bullet train. And we got on the bullet train. The train's running 180 miles an hour. So it's going 3 miles every minute.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it took, I looked at my watch, it took 30 minutes to get outside of Tokyo. To get into the country.
Yeah, because Tokyo was just widespread as far as
it just went
area.
Forever. Man.
Yeah.
And building after building, and the buildings on top of buildings, and everybody living in 4 and 5 story buildings. And it's like, wow. I mean, pretty amazing, that country. And great experience to go there and wrestle.
Well, first of all, I don't believe Ric Flair would dress that way, and Terry Funk would act that way. It just doesn't sound like them at all.
Yeah. You can't imagine, I'm sure. Yeah.
Not at all. All right, question number 2. We get closer to home. Lawton Smith, Jackson, Mississippi, says you covered so much of the wrestling promotions worldwide in such a short period of time. How did you know so much about territories and individual companies all over the world in 1965?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, I guess because I grew up in the business, and once I got to be about 12, 13 years old, I started to really pay attention about who was in different parts of the country. And I had the opportunity to go to some NWA meetings and see the guys put faces with parts of the country. And what happened is, and I picked 1965 because it was the year that I was about 5 years from starting myself in wrestling, but I had been with Dad on a lot of trips, and I had met a lot of people and shook a lot of hands, and so there wasn't a heck of a lot of change in ownerships in wrestling territories. The big changes came in talent changes. I mean, your wrestlers changed. Some territories, big territories, would run maybe 40, 50 wrestlers a year through their territory. And, and then there were just so many of them. Wow, it was just amazing. So I kind of really enjoyed doing this episode. And if anybody out there hears this and they haven't listened to this one, I think they'll be pretty much amazed to see just exactly how much was happening in 65. The one thing I didn't like about this program is I wasn't able to put together any type of figures about how many people were watching and coming to wrestling live events. Wow, it blew away the numbers that the WWE ever got close to. I mean, it was just amazing what was happening all over the world, not just in this country, but in the world itself. And so, it's a very popular, time frame. Wrestling was on fire pretty much all over the world. And, so I really kind of had a good time doing it. And I got to mention a whole lot of guys that I was already had dealt with, like Adrian Street when I'm talking to England, and, just a tremendous group of people. And wow, what a business it was back in those days.
Well, I'm curious too, but at age 13, you probably knew as much as a kid at age 13 as a lot of maybe adults knew about wrestling across the country or around the world. And did you know at that time, was your father dealing with or talking to out of country other markets or other promoters from other places in the world?
Oh, yeah, of course he was. I mean, you had to stay in touch. You wanted to stay on top of things. That's where you got ideas from. That's where you got talent from. And you were, and then you would go to those NWA meetings, and there was as many as 30 or 40 territories. And, putting those faces with the territories, it started to register with me about just how big wrestling was. I mean, it was huge, and it stayed that way on into the 80s. So it wasn't just in the short time frame, but you stayed in touch with people, and you learned a heck of a lot. And then there were a lot of regional promotions that were getting together. There was a group in the South, the Southern promoters. You had the Carolinas, you had the Georgia territory, you had the Florida territory, you had my granddad in Tennessee, you had Louisiana, promoters out of Louisiana. So, you had Southern, and they were all talking about the talent that were the guys, the angles that they worked that really got over. I mean, everybody seemed to be helpful to everybody else. And all that's going to die, about 20 years down the road from 65. Yeah. That's all going to start coming to an end.
Sadly. And well, it did. All right. So we move to question number 3. Barbara Stockard Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. She says, let's talk about Stu Hart and the Calgary, Canada territory. You told a couple of stories that were great about the Funks visiting him and his family. Do you have at least one more story?
Well, Barbara, gosh, I love Stu Hart, man. He's one of the most crazy characters in all of wrestling history. He's got to be, and he's got that very unique voice. It's gonna get the. He's hey, geez, the guy. What? Tell me, and that's where the Mongolian stomper, Archie Goldie, got his start. Was in that territory with Stu Hart. And every time I would go to the NWA meeting, once I had my own territory and Archie was working for me, that's all Stu wanted to talk about. And he would get me off to the side, and Stu could spend 5 minutes asking one question,
right?
Because he couldn't seem to get to the point, and he would go, Archie, got the Stomper, got this. He works. Does he work? Does he? And I would go, yeah, he works for me. Yes, Stu. He's still with me. Oh God, yeah. Well, he started into another one. So Stu Hart lived in this big house in Calgary on the top of a mountain, or a big hill at least, anyway. And the Funks used to go there and wrestle and stampede. He had a huge event in the summer every year where the rodeo connected with wrestling, and they drew these monstrous crowds. And in Stu's house, he had, in the bottom of his house, he had what the wrestlers called the dungeon.
Yeah.
And kind of similar to the snake pit.
Exactly.
Anyway,
that's what I was thinking. Yes. Yeah.
The same kind of stuff went on in the dungeon as went on in the snake pit, except Stu took his a little bit bigger. He had a ring in there. The ring was pretty big, and his dungeon was fairly small. So instead of having ropes around the ring, he had walls around the ring.
Oh.
Okay. So then Stu got real creative, because if he ever got a guy in there that was maybe too tough for him and he was having a little trouble, he went and nailed these little pin nails into the wall in certain places.
Oh God. Okay.
Right. Sticking out maybe a half inch, 3/4 of an inch. Little small nail. Right?
Yeah.
Stu knows where they are, but the guy don't have any idea what that's all about. And Stu would, he got this guy's pretty tough. I gotta put him on a nail. Jeez. And he would grab guys up and get their feet off the mat, and he'd drive them backwards into the wall. Wow. I mean, crazy stuff went on down there in that dungeon. It was kind of similar to the one in Florida.
Wow.
I don't think Stu was a proponent of the sugar hole. I think he was more a nail man.
Okay.
Carpenter.
Okay. All right. Okay, all right. No disrespect to the late Stu Hart, but your impression of Stu Hart just now, cross between Daffy Duck and Popeye.
That's pretty good.
That's hard to beat right there.
Stu everybody loves Stu. Stu was a great, and he had one of the biggest wrestling families. He's right up there with our family. A great number of members of his family, and he had daughters that married guys that he made wrestlers out of.
Yeah.
And, he was quite the dude, man. I always really, one of the things I really regretted is I never went to a stampede. I would have loved to have gone up there and been a part of one of those stampedes.
Oh, wow. That would have been cool. All right, so let's go to number 4. Barry Barton, Decatur, Alabama, says, Lester Welch, your father's uncle, you say was a great pilot. he flew wrestlers to matches in his private plane. Do you have a quick story about any of those flights? And listen, I know you've got some stories about flying, especially with Ron
man.
Wright, but
Wow.
okay. Let's see about Lester.
Gosh. And especially with Lester. Well, Ron Wright, I've flown with some crazy people, man, but Lester was totally different than Ron Wright. Now, Ron Wright, you couldn't, you couldn't, you didn't know what to expect when you got on Ron Wright's plane. Is he going to need to have instruments? Are you going to get bad weather? And is he instrument rated? I had that problem with him one time. We were 5,000 feet up. Mountains were 5,000 feet up, and his altimeter showed around 4,000 feet. I said, Ron, and you couldn't see the end of the wings. We were socked in the fog, and he told me I've got the instrument rating, but he didn't have the instrument rating anyway. Lester was quite the opposite. He was so professional, and he was so professional that he was very relaxed about it. He would. One trip we made from San Juan, Puerto Rico to Freeport in the Bahamas, he actually went to sleep. The plane's on autopilot. But when you got 5 or 6 big wrestlers in the back and a bunch of bags on board, and you got nobody up there in the co-pilot seat, and the pilot, his head falls back and he's sound asleep. It's a little disconcerting. You're like, wait a minute here, and then those flights, it was a pretty long flight, even from San Juan back into the northern Bahamas. It was about a 4 or 5 hour flight. So, it's a long flight. And Lester, sometimes on one particular flight, I remember he went to sleep. And when he did, everybody else got up. Nobody else slept. They all was like, wow, we can't go to sleep, man. What happens if something happens? And on one flight, it did. I mean, the plane started sputtering and making noise, and it went, and it nosedived.
Oh.
Yeah, we're probably up maybe 12,000 feet. I don't know what the altimeter was, how high we were. But anyway, it nosed over, and, the gas tank was running out.
Oh.
Right? And he's still asleep. We all, about the same time in unison, man, we all screamed, Lester, Lester. And he kind of turns his head to look back at us, because he had the little doorway in his twin engine plane. So he looked back at all of us, and he had a nasty look on his face, like, hey, what did you wake me up for? And he reached down there and he flipped on a little lever down there between the 2 pilot seats, and that was the auxiliary tank.
Oh.
And then before we were still going down, though, when he flipped it on, we're still headed down, and he flipped the switch, and then he just put his head back and went to sleep, and we're still going down, right?
Yeah.
We're like, oh, now we're all looking at each other. We've already screamed at him. He was a little upset by that. So, we didn't want to upset him again. So, we all just kind of sit there, and everybody grabbed the edges of the seat, the handles on the seats, and like, well, here we go, we're going to crash. And then the plane went, and then it cranked back up, and then it started climbing back up again. And so, it was always a little bit of excitement with Lester. I remember one other time, and he never did this type of mistake, and it was just me on the plane. We were going into Fort Lauderdale. I had wrestled in Tallahassee and driven home from Tallahassee, got up early. We had to leave about 7 o'clock in the morning, got home about 4, got about 2 hours sleep, got my car, drove over to the airport in St. Pete. And that's where Lester kept his plane.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just me and Lester. So I got in the back and I went to sleep. And when I did, we got down to Fort Lauderdale, in the Fort Lauderdale area. Now, there's a lot of airports in that area because you got Miami, you got Fort Lauderdale, you got Hollywood, you got Dania, you got all these little towns. And so I'm asleep and I hear the tower talking to him. They go, negative, negative, negative. You're at the wrong airport.
Oh, there's that. Okay.
Yeah, you're at the wrong airport. Right. I picked up that part of it when I was coming out of my little nap. You're at the wrong airport. And I look up there, and I knew enough at this point not to go screaming at Lester. He didn't like that. And he just he went on. We made the pass and went on around, and I guess we were probably 6 or 8 miles from the actual airport we should have been picking up our wrestlers at. We picked up the crew and we'd fly on. Those trips, Dave, were they were horrible. I mean, you were on a little small private plane. It was always overloaded with bodies and lots of bags, and there's no bathroom. And you got an 8-hour flight from Fort Lauderdale to San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
8 hours. And wow. Need to say no more about that, I guess.
Yeah.
But,
Wow. Yeah.
No.
All right. So there's that way of getting there, or you could surely row a boat. All right. Question number 5. Milton Johnson from Providence, Rhode Island says, Haystack's Calhoun was a huge star in America. I never realized he was big, pardon the pun, in other countries as well. How much money do you think he might have made in his career?
Wow, that's a good question right there, man. Haystack's Calhoun was monstrous in the business in the 50s and 60s, even into the early 70s, I think.
Yeah.
I remember having him on a couple of my cards in Southeastern. One of them, I think we've done already, Dave, probably 1976. I think I had him in for a Battle Royal deal.
Yep.
And I had him for a whole week. And everybody loved Stacks. They called him Stacks.
Yeah.
And everybody loved those Stacks. And he was a mighty big guy, man. He was 500 plus and, pretty round in the middle. And as this guy says, he was pretty big, and that's a pretty good line there, man, Mr. Johnson. Pardon the pun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was a big talent. Yeah, but a lot of people didn't realize he was a worldwide talent. He would go to Europe, and he would work England. He would go to Australia. He worked Japan, gosh, he had to make a lot of money. I'll tell you, when Stacks came, it was kind of like Andre. Stacks was before Andre. He was pre-Andre, really.
Yeah.
You had to pay Stacks good, and because you wanted him back again. He was a real crowd drawer, and he was a pretty good wrestler, considering his size.
Mm-hmm. But
I guess the question was how much money he must have made in his career. Wow. Jeez. That's crazy thought right there. I mean, I know that whatever he was getting every night, it was more than anybody else on those cards, probably. He was probably wrestled for, I don't know exactly the length of his career, but I would guess it's maybe somewhere between 10 and 15 years, probably.
Mm-hmm.
He might have made way back in in the 50s and in the 60s. He probably made, I would say, an average payoff for him would probably be 300, 400, which is a heck of a lot of money. And if you added up all those things and all those matches, I just make a wild guess. That's all I could do is make a
Mhm.
wild guess at it. But maybe $3 million. He might have made $3 million in his career.
Over the course of his career.
Yeah.
And even at $300 or $400 at a time, that's still making a tremendous amount of appearances.
Oh yeah. He was the type of guy that, like most wrestlers, he wrestled 6 nights a week. Sometimes 7. Sometimes
Hmm.
if he was in
Hmm.
a territory and he had TVs, and they used to have live TVs back in those days, he might work 10 times a week.
Oh wow,
So,
yeah, yeah. So, and
uh,
you know, you've told us all along about Andre and how Vince McMahon Sr. had Andre's contract. Was there a similar situation for Haystack's Calhoun?
no, Haystacks was his own boss.
Totally
He
independent. Wow.
totally independent. He booked himself out, and he kept himself busy, and he went in and did a good job for people. And
Did he have
they
an
brought him
agent?
back.
Did he have an agent? Somebody that was answering the phone and taking the bookings or that kind of
I
deal?
don't believe he did. I
Wow.
believe, back in those days, you pretty much booked yourself,
Huh.
and it was pretty common in the 50s, 60s, 70s, hell, on into the 80s, before guys started to get on with big companies that were paying big guarantees.
Hmm.
You just went around the country, worked for individual people, and you set your own schedule and you booked yourself. So, uh, that $3 million, I got to make a guess at this,
Hmm.
in 1965 money.
Yeah.
uh I
Wow.
bet you I bet that's more than $20 million.
He had to be one of the highest paid athletes on the planet at the time.
Oh yeah. He
Any
was making far
any
beyond
sport.
any football players, any
Yeah. Oh
basketball
yeah.
players, any other athlete in any other sport.
NFL players probably did not even make $10,000 in a year at the time.
Well, I remember in 1970 when I was finishing playing basketball at the University of Miami and thinking about the possibility of playing pro basketball. Those guys were lucky to make. They weren't making $100,000.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
nowadays it's totally different. But
Yeah.
and if you were a big name, you might get a little more than that. But I could make a lot more money wrestling than I could playing basketball in 1970.
Oh, no doubt. That's pretty awesome. But he must have had and must have kept a huge black book so that everybody he came in contact with, he had a phone number for. He had to have had a phone number and a name for every town, and he knew who to call when he was in that area. So
Yeah, and luckily, they did have territories in the United States, and when he went to England, you had owners there
yeah,
of,
yeah,
of companies,
yeah,
and you just dealt with one guy most of the time, and he got you booked in all the towns in his territory,
yeah.
and yeah, he probably had a very large black book, and he probably had a big fat wallet.
Yeah, I bet he did. Can you remember how tall was he and how much did he weigh?
He was about he was close to 6 feet, and he probably weighed every bit of 500, between
Good,
5 and 600.
but only 6 feet
Probably.
tall.
Yeah.
See, I would have guessed 6'5" or something like that for a big plowboy like that. So,
No,
wow,
he wasn't. He wasn't really tall. He wasn't tall like Andre,
yeah,
and
yeah,
he
yeah.
had a much different build than Andre. He was one of those original fat guy stars.
And
that,
what would he have traveled on? Now we know, and we knew about all the stuff that Andre went through in and out of airports, and the backseat of vans was where he was more comfortable. What about Haystacks?
Oh man, it was horrible for him, I'm sure. Except, you had some big old Cadillacs. They used to make big Cadillacs back in the 50s and
Yeah,
60s,
yeah.
And I'm sure he had him a Cadillac or something that, that he could ride in pretty comfortably,
Yeah, yeah.
but I'm sure, man, it was agonizing for him to be, to fly.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
'Cause,
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't know how they accommodate him when he flew. And you couldn't get to Australia or to England without
Yeah.
flying. So he's probably spent a bunch of time on the plane. But that's a great question, Mr. Johnson. That's a good one, man.
Yeah, fun stuff right there. There you go. It's another Southeastern Rewinds Tell Me More, where the Tennessee stud Ron Fuller answered 5 questions about Studcast number 21, which is now on Ron's new home on YouTube. Hey, remember to find Southeastern Rewind on YouTube. Subscribe, ring the bell to get reminders on when the greatest stories in wrestling will be dropped on YouTube. And be sure to tell your friends about Southeastern Rewind. For Ron Fuller, I'm David Summers. We'll be back soon with another Tell Me More.